This is the weekly sales meeting for June 29th, 2025. My name is Chris Fleming. You can reach me at chris@cdmediaconsulting.com or go to our website at cdmediaconsulting.com. Today's topic, would you be opposed to that? Selling is often seen as a game of persuasion, but it is more like a skill of guidance. Great salespeople do not force people to buy. Instead, they lead them through the decision-making process, doing so with some forethought and respect for the process. One of the ways they do this is by following a consistent plan. This is a set of techniques, questions, and methods that help steer the conversation. Certain questions have the power to move people toward a yes, and they do it without making them feel pressured. A great example is this question: would you be opposed to that? At first glance, it seems quite simple, but underneath, it uses deep psychological principles that make it quite effective. Having a clear plan during a sales conversation creates a kind of invisible path for the buyer to walk down. It keeps the seller focused. It helps the buyer feel like they are making the decisions themselves. Sales expert Brian Tracy says, approach each customer with the idea of helping them to solve a problem or achieve a goal, not selling a product or service. If you follow a well-thought-out approach, it feels more like help. It will feel less like a pitch from a pushy salesperson. The reason why the question, would you be opposed to that, works so well is because of how the human brain reacts to language. People have a natural resistance to being told what to do. When someone says you should do this, or you need to buy this, it can trigger a defensive reaction in the brain. But when you ask if they would be opposed to an idea, you lower that defense. Instead of feeling pushed, they feel respected and in control. Studies show that people are far more willing to say yes when they feel like they have freedom of choice. There is a famous psychological experiment. It is called the "but you are free" technique. Researchers found that telling people they were free to choose doubled the chances they would agree to a request. Would you be opposed to that taps into the same idea. It gives the buyer the sense that they have the final say, and they do because they do. This technique uses a method known as negative reversal. Instead of asking someone to agree, you are asking if they disagree. It is a soft touch. It is not an aggressive ask. Deep in the heart of human psychology, most do not want to seem negative or unreasonable. When you ask if they would be opposed to something, that sounds smart. They will often say, "No, I'm not opposed." This moves the conversation toward a yes. This is a natural progression. When you ask, would you be opposed to that, the receiver is psychologically nudged towards saying no. People generally don't want to seem difficult or negative. This is especially when the suggestion sounds reasonable. Saying no actually signals agreement. They are not opposed. It is a soft way of gaining commitment. It feels safer and less confrontational than saying yes outright. The yes carries a more psychological weight and a sense of obligation. This approach respects how people want to be treated. Dale Carnegie is the author of How to Win Friends and Influence People. In it, he wrote, "A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still." If buyers feel forced, even if they say yes in the moment, they may later regret it. Using soft questions like "would you be opposed to that" keeps the buyer's dignity intact and helps build a positive feeling around the decision. This is why you should plan your conversations in advance. You should have your key phrases at the ready. It makes the entire experience better for both the buyer and the seller. Harvard University's program on negotiation has done research on this subject. The research shows that asking thoughtful, open-ended questions can lower tension. It builds trust. Guiding the conversation helps both sides. When you do it with respect, curiosity, and patience, it feels like collaboration. It is less adversarial. You are not fighting against each other. Sales isn't about overpowering decisions. It is about creating an environment where saying yes feels natural and smart. Asking, would you be opposed to that, lowers resistance by making the conversation feel safe and respectful. It builds comfort without applying pressure, allowing the buyer to feel in control. This soft approach leads to more genuine agreements. The buyer moves forward by choice, not force. It creates trust and a stronger connection throughout the conversation. Another principle that makes this method powerful is called loss aversion. People are more motivated by fear of loss than hope of gain. In fact, they will work 2 times as hard to avoid a loss. When you ask if someone is opposed to an idea, it introduces that fear by opposing it. It does so in a subtle way. It places the idea that they might miss out on the table, but it does so without threats or pressure. This allows the buyer to reconsider on their own terms. It gives a sense of control. Sales trainer Jeb Blount reminds us that people buy for their reasons, not yours. Asking if someone is opposed lets the buyer reflect in private on their own reasons, instead of feeling bombarded by you, the seller, and your reasons. It encourages the buyer to have that internal conversation. This chat is more likely to lead to a decision in favor of the sale. After all, your request was perfectly reasonable. Having a real process for guiding sales conversations creates consistency. Without it, one meeting might go great while another one falls apart. But with a steady approach, salespeople can be better prepared for what may happen. As Stephen Covey, the author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, said, begin with the end in mind. Having a real process means each action will lead to the next. This makes it more likely the conversation will end in success. You are tipping the scales in your favor. Would you be opposed to that also helps by slowing down the moment by enough to give the buyer time to think. One of our favorite books on influence is by Dr. Robert Cialdini. He wrote Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. In it, he demonstrates that when people feel rushed, they are much more likely to say no. But when they feel calm and respected, they are open to hearing new ideas. Giving someone a second to breathe can make all the difference in the world. This method also mirrors techniques used outside of sales. In therapy, for instance, counselors are trained to ask soft, open-ended questions. This allows clients to explore their thoughts without feeling judged. Carl Rogers is one of the fathers of modern psychology. He said the curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. When buyers feel accepted and unpressured, they are more open to making changes. It helps them move forward. Using permission-based questions can lead to micro-commitments. These are small steps that build up to bigger decisions. Reaching small agreements along the way makes the final request a foregone conclusion. Once a buyer says they are not opposed to an idea, it becomes easier for them to say yes to the next part of the offer. People like to stay consistent with what they have said. Even a small commitment can lead to a much bigger one if handled correctly. Having a reliable way to guide sales conversations helps sellers handle rejection better. A no is no longer the end of the road. It is a mere signal to dig a little deeper and understand the buyer's point of view. Winston Churchill said success is the ability to go from one failure to another with no loss of enthusiasm. A steady method allows sellers to stay positive and persistent. They don't come off as pushy. Then you avoid the stereotype of the typical seller. Would you be opposed to that works because it taps into tactical empathy. This is the concept taught by former FBI negotiator Chris Voss. Tactical empathy means showing real understanding for the other person's position. When you ask permission or probe for their true feelings, you show respect. And respect builds trust. This is the foundation of any real relationship, including sales. Modern research supports this idea. Using a thoughtful path in sales conversations gets better results. In the Challenger Sales Study, this is confirmed. The study reveals that top-performing sellers succeed by teaching valuable insights. They guide the conversation with purpose. They also tailor their approach to fit each buyer's specific needs. They do so without being aggressive or pushy. Asking soft, permission-based questions fits this model. You lead the buyer to a solution without dragging them there. Preparation and planning are the keys to success in any profession. It was legendary coach John Wooden who said failing to prepare is preparing to fail. Having a clear approach gives the seller an advantage. It helps us handle unexpected turns while staying focused on the goal. Preparation builds confidence. It sharpens communication. It ensures that every step of the conversation moves with purpose. This makes it far more likely we can guide the buyer to a positive decision. Today's buyers are more informed and skeptical than ever. A study from HubSpot shows most prefer to research on their own. That is long before engaging with a salesperson. This shift means sellers must guide conversations with greater care. Pushing too hard breaks trust, while a softer, more respectful approach builds it. When sellers lead and focus on helping, buyers are far more likely to open the door. They will invite them into the decision-making process. They do it with confidence, and they will volunteer. Soft, respectful questions like "would you be opposed to that?" create a stronger overall experience for the buyer. Salesforce shows 84% of customers believe a company's experience is as important as its products. When sellers make the process smooth and pressure-free, buyers feel valued and respected. This positive experience builds trust. It encourages long-term relationships. It can lead to valuable referrals and repeat business. It makes the buying journey as important as the sale itself. "Would you be opposed to that?" works because it gives the buyer a safe and easy way out if needed. Buyers often fear feeling trapped or pressured. Ironically, offering the freedom to say no makes them more comfortable and more likely to say yes. When people feel safe, they lower their defenses and are more open to moving forward. Creating that sense of safety is a powerful way to build trust. This is what encourages genuine decisions. Good selling is never about tricking or pressuring people. It is about helping them make the best decisions for themselves. Zig Ziglar said you can have everything in life you want if you will just help enough people get what they want. Use a well-thought-out, permission-based approach, one where you guide rather than push. This builds trust, respect, and a real connection. When buyers feel supported instead of sold, they are far more likely to move forward. This is what creates a longer-lasting business relationship. You will get to close more often. My new book, 21st Century Sales Success, is now available on Amazon.com. If you like what you have heard here today, please consider ordering a copy or two. You can always send one to a friend. Go to cdmediaconsulting.com right now and follow the instructions to order.